You don't live here anymore, Danielle. Dad said the apartment is ours now. Pack your things. My brother's wife said it loud enough for everyone to hear. My brother crossed his arms and added, "You've taken enough already." I looked at them both and said quietly, "You really think you know the whole story?" The room fell silent. My name is Danielle Harper. I'm 34 years old. I'm a nurse at a busy hospital downtown. And most days I spend more time caring for strangers than I do for myself. My life has never been glamorous. I work long shifts that leave my feet aching and my hands smelling faintly of disinfectant. But I've always believed helping people matters. Growing up, my brother was the favorite. Everyone praised him for every small success. If he passed a class, he was brilliant. If he got a new job, the family celebrated like he had conquered the world. Me, I was the quiet one who handled responsibility. No applause, just expectation. When Dad started getting sick a few years ago, that pattern stayed the same. My brother and his wife visited occasionally. They brought flowers and smiles, then left after an hour. I stayed, I cooked meals, I drove Dad to doctor appointments, I paid some of the bills when his savings started shrinking. The apartment we lived in belonged to him. It was small but warm. The kitchen still smelled like the dinners he cooked when we were kids. I remember nights sitting at the table while he told stories about his younger days. That place held our history. I had dreams too. I wanted to save enough money to open a small community clinic someday. Nothing fancy, just a place where people who couldn't afford care could still be treated with dignity. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. Before the story goes further, I want to say something. If you've ever worked quietly for your family and still felt invisible, you know how that feels. Maybe you gave time, energy, even money, and people acted like it meant nothing. If that sounds familiar, subscribe and share your story in the comments. I read them all, and you're not alone. Let's go. Everything changed the day I came home after a 12-hour hospital shift. The hallway smelled like fresh paint and cardboard. At first I thought someone had moved into another unit. Then I opened the apartment door. Boxes were everywhere. My brother stood in the living room holding a roll of packing tape. His wife was stacking dishes in the kitchen like she owned the place. "What's going on?" I asked slowly. She glanced at me and shrugged. "We moved in." I blinked. "You what?" My brother didn't even look guilty. "Dad said we could have the apartment. We're taking over things now." "That's not true," I said. My voice shook from exhaustion and confusion. "Dad never told me that." His wife gave a thin smile. "Well, maybe he didn't want to upset you." I noticed my books pushed into a box near the wall. My clothes were folded into bags. My stomach twisted. "You're basically a guest now," she continued. "But don't worry, you can stay a little while until you figure out where to go." My brother nodded like he was doing me a favor. "Yeah, be grateful we're letting you stay." A few days later, we had a family gathering. My aunt, 2 cousins, and a couple neighbors came by to check on Dad. The living room felt crowded, and the smell of cheap pizza filled the air. My brother took the opportunity to speak loudly. "I'm stepping up to handle the apartment now," he announced. "Someone had to take responsibility." His wife added with a laugh, "Danielle's been freeloading here long enough." I froze. "That's not true," I said. "I've been paying bills and taking care of Dad every day." But they kept talking over me. "Come on," she said loudly. "What exactly have you ever contributed?" A few people looked uncomfortable. Others just stayed silent. Then my brother pulled out his phone and showed renovation photos. "We're already planning upgrades," he said proudly. "New floors, new kitchen. This place is ours now." I stared at him, my own brother, acting like I was a stranger in my home, and suddenly I understood something. They truly believed they had already won. The next few weeks proved how far they were willing to go. The first betrayal came quickly. One afternoon I came home and my key didn't work. The lock had been changed. I knocked on the door. My brother opened it halfway. "Why did you change the locks?" I asked. "Security," he said casually. "Too many people coming and going." "You mean me?" He shrugged. "Just text before you come by." I stood there holding my bag from the hospital. I felt like a visitor asking permission to enter my own life. The second betrayal happened at a family dinner. My aunt invited everyone to celebrate her birthday. The table was full of food, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the room. For a moment, I thought things might feel normal. And then my brother's wife laughed and said loudly, "Danielle's basically the family charity case." A few people chuckled awkwardly. "She stays at the apartment but doesn't even own it," she added. I felt my face burn, but I stayed quiet. I kept eating. Work became my escape. At the hospital, I focused on patients and routines. I listened to the steady beeping of monitors and the soft squeak of shoes on polished floors. It was the only place where people respected me. The third betrayal hurt the most. One night I walked past Dad's room and heard voices. My brother was inside. Just tell them you promised it to me, he was saying. Dad's voice sounded weak. I don't remember saying that. You did? My brother insisted. Come on, Dad, make it official. I stepped away before they noticed me. My hands trembled. Later, my brother cornered me in the kitchen. You should stop fighting this, he said. You've already lost. I looked at him calmly. You're making a mistake you can't undo, I told him. He laughed and walked away, but things were not as simple as he believed. During the months Dad had been sick, I helped him organize paperwork. Medical bills, insurance forms, letters. We spent quiet afternoons sorting through folders at the kitchen table. The smell of old paper and coffee filled the room. What they didn't know was I had been documenting everything. At first it was simple notes, dates of appointments, messages about finances. But when my brother started making strange claims about the apartment, I became careful. I saved emails, I kept text messages, I recorded a few conversations where they talked about convincing Dad to hand the place over. Some of those messages showed clear pressure, words that made my stomach twist when I read them again. Still, I stayed quiet. I watched him grow more confident every week. My brother bragged to relatives about selling the apartment someday. His wife talked about remodeling the kitchen like she was already living in a magazine ad. They thought the story was already written, but they hadn't seen the evidence. There was one person who understood the situation better than anyone, Mr. Caldwell. He had been our family's lawyer for decades, a calm older man with silver hair and a voice that never rose above a steady tone. I visited his office one afternoon after work. The room smelled like old books and polished wood. I was wondering when you'd come, he said gently. You knew something was wrong? I asked. He nodded. Your brother has been very eager about that apartment. Meanwhile, my brother and his wife became louder about their plans. They told relatives they would sell the apartment after renovations and buy a bigger house. They bragged like victory was guaranteed. I didn't argue anymore. I simply nodded and listened. Then Mr. Caldwell scheduled the official reading of Dad's legal documents. Invitations went out to family members. Everyone expected a simple confirmation. The day finally came. The lawyer's office felt tense. Chairs scraped softly on the floor as relatives sat down. The sound of the wall clock ticking filled the quiet room. My brother stood with his hands in his pockets, smiling confidently. I just want to thank everyone for supporting me while I stepped up to handle Dad's responsibilities, he said proudly. Mr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses and began reading. According to these documents, ownership of the apartment has not been transferred. The room went silent. My brother frowned. What do you mean? It means the property remains under your father's legal control. The lawyer replied calmly. Shock spread across the room. I raised my hand slightly. May I share something? Mr. Caldwell nodded. I played one of the recordings. My brother's voice filled the office, pushing Dad to confirm the apartment transfer. My brother's face turned red. You recorded us. That's insane, he shouted. I looked straight at him. No, that's called protecting the truth. Mr. Caldwell spoke again. These materials suggest pressure placed on your father while he was vulnerable. If necessary, they could have legal consequences. Then he opened another folder. One more update was made to the documents shortly before your father's condition worsened. My heart pounded softly. The apartment, he continued, was left entirely to Danielle Harper in recognition of her years of care. The room exploded with whispers. My brother just stared at the table. His wife looked like the air had left her lungs. Their plans collapsed in seconds. I took a slow breath and spoke calmly. I am not interested in a legal fight, but the apartment is mine now. Within weeks, they moved out. No more bragging, no more insults, just quiet packing and lowered eyes. Some relatives came to me later and apologized. They admitted they believed the story my brother had told. For a while, I felt strange walking through the apartment alone again, but slowly it started to feel like home. I focused on saving money and working toward my dream of opening that small clinic someday. And sometimes I sit at the same kitchen table where Dad and I sorted papers. They thought silence meant weakness. But sometimes silence just means you're waiting for the right moment. If your family ever tried to take something that belonged to you, whether it was your home, your inheritance, or your voice, I want to hear about it. Subscribe and share your story in the comments. Click hype to help this story reach others who need to know they are not alone. Your story has power. If you felt a connection to mine, please subscribe and share your journey in the comments. Every hype you give this video helps empower someone else who might be going through the same thing. Thank you for being here and for listening.